Some people believe that rock bottom is the end of your story. But what if I told you that sometimes the worst day of your life is actually the first page of your greatest chapter? This is the story of a woman who lost everything in a single afternoon, only to discover that the man who would change her life forever was waiting for her in the most unexpected place. But here's the twist. Nothing about this rescue was what it seemed. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why the person you think is your enemy might actually be your greatest blessing in disguise. Her name was Claire Matthews, and on a cold Tuesday morning in November, she found herself standing on a sidewalk in downtown Chicago with nothing but a duffel bag, a backpack, and tears streaming down her face. 27 years old, ICU nurse, always punctual, always reliable, always the one people called when they needed help. And now she was homeless. It had happened so fast. 3 months earlier, Claire had met a woman named Jessica at a hospital charity event. Jessica was charming, well-dressed, and claimed to be a pharmaceutical sales rep looking for a roommate to split rent on a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. The rent was steep, but splitting it made it manageable. Claire had been living in a cramped studio, working double shifts, sending money back home to her younger brother in college. The upgrade felt like a sign that her hard work was finally paying off. But Jessica wasn't a pharmaceutical rep, she was a con artist. And that Tuesday morning, when Claire came home from a brutal overnight shift at the hospital, she found the locks changed, her belongings in trash bags on the curb, and a note from the real landlord explaining that Jessica had never paid a single month's rent. The woman had collected Claire's money, 3 months' worth, nearly $9,000, and vanished. The landlord was sympathetic but firm. Claire had 20 minutes to collect her things before he called the police for trespassing. Claire tried calling Jessica. The number was disconnected. She tried going to the police, but without a lease in her name, without any proof beyond Cash App receipts to a woman who'd used a fake name, there was nothing they could do. They told her it was a civil matter. They told her to get a lawyer. How do you get a lawyer when you can't even afford a place to sleep? She called her mother in Ohio. The conversation was brief and painful. Her mother was already struggling, already stretched thin, helping Claire's brother with tuition. There was no safety net to catch her. She called friends, but everyone had roommates, everyone had leases, everyone had complications. One friend offered her a couch for a week, maybe 2. But Claire could hear the hesitation in her voice, the unspoken worry about overstaying. So that night, Claire slept in her car. A 10-year-old Honda Civic with a broken heater and a passenger seat that didn't recline. She parked in the lot of a 24-hour diner, kept her head down, and tried not to think about how quickly everything had fallen apart. She had $230 in her bank account. Her next paycheck wasn't for another week. She couldn't afford a deposit on a new place even if she found one. The next day, she went to work, showered in the hospital locker room, changed into her scrubs, smiled at patients, checked vitals, administered medications. Nobody knew. She was good at hiding pain. Years of watching her father drink himself to death had taught her that. You put on a brave face. You keep moving. You survive. But by the 3rd night, exhaustion was catching up with her. She couldn't keep sleeping in her car. It was getting colder. Her body ached from the uncomfortable positions. She needed rest, real rest, or she'd make a mistake at work. And in her line of work, mistakes cost lives. That's when she remembered the hospital parking garage. It was heated, well-lit, and secure. If she parked on the 4th level, the one mostly used by visiting doctors during the day, no one would notice her at night. It wasn't a solution, but it was survival. On the 5th night, at 2:30 in the morning, a security guard found her. His name was Hector, an older man with kind eyes who'd worked at the hospital for 15 years. He knocked on her window gently, and when Claire rolled it down, he didn't ask her to leave. He asked if she was okay. And for the first time in 5 days, someone showed her kindness, without judgment. She broke down, told him everything. The scam, the eviction, the shame of being a nurse who couldn't even secure her own housing. Hector listened, then did something unexpected. He told her about a man he knew, a man who'd recently asked him if he knew anyone trustworthy who needed work. The job was simple, organizing files and managing schedules for a private estate. It came with a small cottage on the property. room and board included. Claire was skeptical. It sounded too good to be true, and after Jessica, she didn't trust easy answers. But Hector pulled out his phone and made a call right there in the parking garage at 3 in the morning. He spoke to someone briefly, then handed Claire the phone. The voice on the other end was deep, measured, and surprisingly awake for that hour. Hector says you're a nurse who's fallen on hard times. Is that accurate? Claire confirmed it was. Can you be at this address tomorrow at noon? He rattled off a location in Gold Coast, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Chicago. Claire said yes, because what else was she going to say? Good. Bring your resume, and be prepared to start immediately if we're both satisfied. And Miss Matthews, Hector doesn't vouch for people lightly. Don't make him regret it. The call ended. Claire looked at Hector, who was smiling. That's Julian Archer. Good man. Tough but fair. If he hires you, your problems are over. The next day at noon, Claire stood in front of a limestone mansion that looked like it belonged in a European capital, not a Chicago neighborhood. The gate opened automatically as she approached, and a woman in her 50s greeted her at the door. Her name was Margaret, the head of household staff, and she was all business. She led Claire through halls lined with artwork that probably cost more than Claire's entire nursing school education. They arrived at a study where a man sat behind a massive oak desk, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when they entered, and Claire's first thought was that he looked tired. Not physically, but in the way that people who carry too much responsibility look tired. He was in his late 30s, dark hair going silver at the temples, sharp features, expensive suit even at home. Miss Matthews, he said, standing and extending a hand. Julian Archer. Please sit. The interview wasn't what Claire expected. He didn't ask about her nursing experience much. Instead, he asked about her childhood, her family, what she valued most in life. He asked about the eviction, and when she explained what Jessica had done, his expression darkened. People who prey on trust, he said quietly, are the lowest form of human being. I'm sorry that happened to you. Then he explained the job. He ran a private equity firm, specialized in acquiring and restructuring struggling companies. His schedule was chaos. He needed someone to manage his personal affairs, his calendar, correspondence, household logistics. The pay was more than she made as a nurse. The cottage on the property was hers, fully furnished. She'd have access to the main house kitchen, the gym, the library. In exchange, he expected discretion, reliability, and honesty above all else. I'm going to be blunt with you, Miss Matthews. I don't need someone with experience in estate management. I need someone with integrity. Hector said you broke down in a parking garage, rather than steal or beg. That tells me more than any resume ever could. The question is, are you willing to accept help? Claire didn't hesitate. Yes. Good. Margaret will show you to the cottage. You start tomorrow. And Miss Matthews, whatever happened before today, it's over. You're safe here. The cottage was more like a small house. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, hardwood floors, and windows overlooking a private garden. Claire set down her duffel bag and backpack and sat on the bed, and for the first time in a week, she allowed herself to breathe. She'd made it. She'd survived. But as the sun set that evening, as she unpacked her few belongings and tried to process the whirlwind of the last 24 hours, she heard shouting from the main house. Angry voices, male voices, words she couldn't make out but tones she recognized. Conflict, the kind that turns physical if it's not careful. She looked out her window and saw 2 men in the garden, face to face, both with clenched fists. One was Julian. The other was younger, maybe early 30s, with the same sharp features, but a wilder energy. Brothers, she guessed. And they were about to come to blows. Margaret appeared at her door moments later, slightly out of breath. I apologize for the noise. Family matters. Best to stay inside tonight. But Claire was a nurse, and nurses don't stay inside when people are hurting. She stepped out into the garden just as the younger man shoved Julian hard enough to make him stumble. You want to control everything, the younger man shouted. Just like Dad. You think you're so much better than me. Evan, you're drunk, Julian said, his voice strained with patience wearing thin. Go sleep it off. We'll talk in the morning. Don't tell me what to do. Evan swung. Julian blocked it, but barely. Claire didn't think. She stepped between them. Hands up, voice firm. Stop. Both of you. Right now. They both froze, startled by the interruption. Evan looked at her with glassy, confused eyes. Who the hell are you? Someone who's seen enough people hurt each other for one lifetime, Claire said. Whatever you're fighting about, it's not worth this. Evan laughed, a bitter sound. You don't know anything about it, sweetheart. This is family business. Between me and my perfect older brother who never makes mistakes. You're right, Claire said. I don't know anything about your situation, but I know that you'll both regret this in the morning. And I know that whatever you're angry about, violence won't fix it. Something in her tone, or maybe the exhaustion in her eyes, made Evan pause. He looked at Julian, then back at Claire, then stumbled backward and sat down hard on a garden bench. Fine. Whatever. You win, Julian. You always win. Julian exhaled slowly, then looked at Claire with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, maybe, mixed with something else. Shame, perhaps, that she'd witnessed this. Thank you, he said quietly. You should go back inside. This isn't your problem. But Claire stayed, because she recognized the look in Evan's eyes. It was the same look her father had when he drank. Not anger. Desperation. Are you okay? She asked him. Evan looked up at her, surprised. Why do you care? Because you're in pain, Claire said simply. And because nobody else seems to be asking. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment Claire Matthews stopped being just an employee and became part of something much more complicated. Because Evan looked at her with tears in his eyes and said, he wants to sell Dad's company. Everything Dad built. And I can't stop him. Julian's jaw tightened. That's not what's happening, Evan. I'm trying to save the company. You're the one bleeding it dry with your reckless decisions. Reckless. Evan stood up, angry again. I'm trying to expand. I'm trying to grow. You're too afraid to take any risks. You invested $3 million in a cryptocurrency scheme that collapsed in 6 months. Julian shot back. You hired your drinking buddies as consultants and paid them 6-figure salaries for doing nothing. You're not expanding, Evan. You're sabotaging everything Dad worked for because you're too proud to admit you don't know what you're doing. Claire could see it now. This wasn't just a fight. This was years of resentment, years of competition, years of a younger brother trying to prove himself to an older brother who'd always been the golden child. She'd seen this before. Not in her own family, but in others. The pattern was always the same. How did your father die? She asked quietly. Both brothers turned to look at her, surprised by the question. Julian answered first. Heart attack. 2 years ago. Stress-related. And you've been fighting over the company ever since, Claire said. It wasn't a question. Evan looked away. Julian's silence confirmed it. Claire took a breath, then told them something she'd never told anyone outside her family. I had a father, too. He was a machinist. Worked for the same factory for 30 years. When the factory closed, he and his coworker, his best friend, decided to start their own small machine shop together. 50-50 partners. They'd known each other since they were kids. They were like brothers. She paused, the memory still painful even years later. My grandmother died and left my father $20,000. His partner thought half of it should go into the business. My dad thought it should stay with family. They fought about it for months. The friendship fell apart. The business fell apart. And my father, he started drinking because he'd lost his best friend, his business, and his sense of purpose all at once. He died when I was 16. Liver failure. And his former partner, he showed up at the funeral, crying, saying it was all his fault, that the money didn't matter, that he'd give anything to have his friend back. Both brothers were staring at her now. Claire's voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. $20,000 cost me my father and cost another man his best friend. So whatever you two are fighting about, whatever company or money or pride is at stake, I promise you it's not worth losing each other. Because you can rebuild a business. You can't rebuild a brother. The silence that followed was heavy. Evan was the first to break it. his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry about your dad." "So am I," Claire said. "Every single day. Don't make someone else sorry about theirs." Evan looked at Julian, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. "I don't want to fight anymore," he said, and his voice cracked. "I just want you to believe in me. Just once." Julian's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. "Evan, I've always believed in you. But believing in you doesn't mean watching you destroy yourself. It means loving you enough to tell you when you're wrong." "Then help me be right," Evan said. "Stop trying to control everything and help me learn." And just like that, the wall between them began to crack. Not collapse, not yet, but crack. It was a start. Julian looked at Claire with something like wonder. "You've been here one day, and you just did what 2 years of family therapy couldn't accomplish. Who are you?" Claire smiled sadly. "Just someone who learned the hard way what matters and what doesn't." Over the following weeks, Claire settled into her role at the Archer estate, but the job evolved beyond anything outlined in her initial interview. She managed Julian's calendar, yes, organized his files, coordinated with his business team, but she also became something unexpected: a neutral party, a voice of reason when the brothers' old patterns resurfaced, which they did often. She learned that the Archer family business was a legacy pharmaceutical company called Archer Biomedical, started by the brothers' father, Thomas Archer, 40 years ago. It had once been valued at over $100 million, pioneering several life-saving medications. But after Thomas's death, Evan, who'd been given a VP position despite having no pharmaceutical background, had made a series of disastrous decisions, trying to prove himself. He'd invested in flashy but unproven drug trials, hired expensive consultants who promised quick results, and spent lavishly on a rebrand that alienated their core medical community. Julian, the CFO and now acting CEO, was trying to right the ship by cutting costs, returning to their foundational research, and rebuilding trust with hospitals and distributors. But Evan saw this as Julian erasing their father's legacy and his own contributions. The board of directors was split, with some supporting Julian's steady approach and others believing Evan's aggressive expansion, despite its failures, showed the kind of innovation the company needed. The real crisis came on a Friday afternoon 6 weeks after Claire arrived. Julian called an emergency meeting in his study. Margaret, Claire, and Evan were all present. Julian's face was grave. "The board voted this morning," he said. "They want to sell the company to Meridian Pharmaceuticals. The offer is substantial, enough to make everyone very wealthy and walk away clean." Evan went pale. "No, absolutely not. Dad would never." "Dad's dead, Evan," Julian said, and his voice was gentle but firm. "And the company is dying too. We're 3 months from insolvency. Meridian is offering us a lifeline that erases Dad's name from his own company." Evan shouted, "Meridian will gut us, take our patents, and shut down our labs. You know this." "I know we're out of options," Julian said. "I've tried everything. I've renegotiated with creditors. I've pitched investors. I've cut every expense I can without firing essential staff. The numbers don't lie." Claire listened, her mind racing. She thought about her father's machine shop, how pride and stubbornness had destroyed it. But she also thought about something else, something Julian had said during her interview. He acquired and restructured struggling companies. He knew how to save businesses. So why couldn't he save his own? "Julian," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" He looked surprised that she'd spoken up, but nodded. "Why aren't you applying your own expertise to this situation? You've saved other people's companies. Why not your own?" Julian was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised her. "Because I'm too close to it. Every decision I make is clouded by what I think Dad would want, or what Evan needs, or what the legacy means. I can't be objective." "Then bring in someone who can be," Claire said. "Someone from outside your firm. Someone with no emotional attachment." "We can't afford that kind of consultant," Julian said. "What about me?" The voice came from Evan, and everyone turned to stare at him. He looked at Julian with an expression that was equal parts defiant and vulnerable. "Let me try to save it, but not my way. Your way. Teach me." Show me what I should have learned 2 years ago, instead of trying to prove I didn't need your help. Julian studied his younger brother for a long moment. Claire could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the risk assessment, the doubt. But she could also see something else. Hope. If I do this, Julian said slowly, you follow my lead. No arguments, no ego, no shortcuts. You learn the business from the ground up like you should have years ago. Can you do that? Evan nodded. I can. I will. Then we have 3 months to turn this around, Julian said. And if we fail, we sell. And we do it with our heads held high, knowing we tried everything. They shook hands. Brothers. Partners. For the first time in 2 years, they were on the same team. What followed was the most intense 3 months of Claire's life, and she'd worked ICU during a pandemic. The brothers threw themselves into saving Archer Biomedical with the kind of focused desperation that either breaks you or forges you into something stronger. Claire found herself working alongside them, not as an assistant anymore, but as an integral part of their strategy team. She discovered she had a talent for it. Her nursing background gave her insights into what hospitals actually needed versus what pharmaceutical companies thought they needed. She helped them identify a gap in the market, a desperately needed antibiotic for drug-resistant infections that Archer had the research foundation for but had abandoned 3 years ago in favor of more profitable ventures. Evan, humbled and genuinely trying, became the face of their pitch to investors and hospital networks. He was charismatic when he wasn't drowning in insecurity, and with Julian's steady guidance, he learned to channel that charisma into genuine connection rather than empty flash. Julian handled the financial restructuring, the negotiations with creditors, the brutal conversations with the board about giving them 1 more quarter to prove themselves. Claire coordinated everything, kept everyone on schedule, and most importantly, mediated when the brothers' old patterns threatened to resurface. Because they did resurface. Old wounds don't heal overnight. There was the night Evan made a pitch to a major hospital network without clearing it with Julian first. The pitch was good, but it contradicted Julian's carefully constructed financial projections, and it nearly torpedoed a week's worth of negotiations. Julian was furious. Evan was defensive. They stood in Julian's study at midnight, shouting at each other, and Claire thought it was all going to fall apart. But then Julian stopped, took a breath, and said, You're right. Your pitch was better than mine. I was so focused on the numbers I forgot we were selling hope, not spreadsheets. I should have included you in the planning. Evan stared at him, shocked. You're agreeing with me? I'm acknowledging that we're stronger together than apart, Julian said. Isn't that the whole point of this? It was a turning point. Not the only one, but maybe the most important one. Because it showed Evan that Julian didn't need to be right more than he needed them to succeed. And it showed Julian that trusting Evan didn't mean losing control. It meant gaining a true partner. The deadline arrived on a Wednesday. The board meeting where they would either present their turnaround plan or accept the Meridian acquisition offer. Claire sat in the back of the conference room, technically there to take notes, but really there because Julian and Evan had insisted she belonged there after everything she'd contributed. Julian presented their financial restructuring. Evan presented their new market strategy and the partnerships he'd secured. Together, they unveiled the antibiotic project that already had preliminary interest from 3 major hospital systems and a government grant application pending. The board asked hard questions. Julian and Evan answered them, sometimes finishing each other's sentences, moving like 2 parts of the same organism. It was remarkable to watch, knowing where they'd started. When they finished, the board deliberated for 30 minutes that felt like 30 hours. Then the chairman, a silver-haired woman who'd known Thomas Archer for 3 decades, spoke. Gentlemen, 3 months ago I was certain this company was finished. I voted to sell because I saw no path forward. But what you've shown us today isn't just a business plan. It's a vision. More than that, it's a partnership between 2 brothers who finally figured out that they're stronger together than at war. Thomas would be proud. We're voting to reject the Meridian offer and support your turnaround plan. The relief in that room was palpable. Evan actually had tears running down his face. Julian stood frozen for a moment, as if he couldn't quite believe they'd done it. Then he turned to Evan and pulled him into a hug that looked like it was decades overdue. That night, there was a celebration at the Archer estate. Margaret outdid herself with dinner. Hector, who'd started this whole chain of events by making a phone call in a parking garage, was there as an honored guest. And Claire, wearing a dress that Margaret had insisted she borrow, found herself toasting with champagne that probably cost more than her old monthly rent. Julian pulled her aside at one point, leading her to the same garden where she'd first intervened in the brothers' fight. "I need to tell you something," he said, and his tone was serious enough that Claire felt her stomach tighten. Was she being let go now that the crisis was over? "You saved more than a company," Julian said. "You saved a family. My relationship with Evan, it was broken long before Dad died. Maybe it was always broken. We were competitive kids who became competitive adults, and when Dad died, we didn't know how to be anything else. You showed us another way." "I just told you about my own family's mistakes," Claire said. "You two did the actual work." "You did more than that," Julian said. "You saw us, not as a billionaire and his screw-up brother, not as a CEO and a VP, just as two men who were hurting and didn't know how to stop. That's a gift, Claire, the ability to see people as they actually are." Claire felt heat rising to her face. "I don't know what to say to that." "Then let me say something else," Julian said, and now his voice was different, uncertain in a way she'd never heard from him. "These past 3 months, working with you, learning from you, watching you navigate chaos with grace and wisdom, I've developed feelings that go beyond professional respect. I'm attracted to you, Claire. More than attracted. And I wanted you to know that, even though I also want you to know that I'd never pressure you or make you uncomfortable in your position here." Claire's heart was hammering. She'd felt it too, the pull toward Julian, the way her pulse quickened when he smiled at her, the way she'd found excuses to stay late working on projects just to be near him. But she'd told herself it was impossible, that he was her employer, that crossing that line was foolish and dangerous. "Julian, she started. But before she could finish, Evan appeared at the garden entrance, slightly drunk and far too loud. "There you are. Claire, I've been looking everywhere for you." He stumbled over, grinning. "I need to tell you something. Actually, everyone needs to hear this." He raised his voice, drawing attention from the other guests. "This woman right here is the reason we're all celebrating tonight. She's the reason I still have a brother and a company and a future. So I want to make a toast." Everyone gathered around as Evan, swaying slightly, raised his glass. "To Claire Matthews, the woman who came to us with nothing and gave us everything. The smartest, kindest, most beautiful person I've ever met. And if my idiot brother doesn't have the guts to tell you he's in love with you, then I will, because you deserve to know." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the garden turned to Julian, whose face had gone carefully blank. Claire felt like she'd been punched in the chest. Evan, realizing what he'd just done, went pale and started to backtrack, but it was too late. Julian set down his glass very carefully and walked back into the house without a word. Claire stood frozen, unsure whether to follow him or stay or possibly just sink into the ground and disappear. Margaret, ever efficient, smoothly redirected the guests' attention and suggested they move the party inside. Evan looked at Claire with horror. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm drunk and stupid, and I just ruined everything." "It's fine," Claire said automatically, though it very much was not fine. "I'll go talk to him." She found Julian in his study, standing at the window, hands in his pockets. "Julian, you should go back to the party," he said without turning around. "It's in your honor, after all." "I don't care about the party," Claire said. "I care that you're upset." "I'm not upset," Julian said, but his voice betrayed him. "I'm embarrassed. I try to have a private conversation with you, to be respectful and appropriate, and my brother turned it into a spectacle. That's very on brand for Evan, actually. Always has to be the center of attention." "He was trying to celebrate," Claire said. "He didn't mean to. Didn't he?" Julian turned to face her now, and his expression was hard. "Evan has spent his entire life competing with me. For our father's attention, for the company, for everything. And now, apparently, for you." Claire's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" Come on, Claire. You're not naive. You've seen the way he looks at you. The way he finds excuses to work with you instead of me. The way he lights up when you enter a room. My brother has feelings for you too. And unlike me, he has no problem making them public. Claire processed this information, her mind spinning. She thought Evan was just being friendly, grateful, perhaps seeing her as something like a sister. But as she replayed the last 3 months, she saw it differently. The lingering looks. The way he'd asked her opinion on things that had nothing to do with work. The time he'd brought her coffee, made exactly the way she liked it, without her telling him. I didn't encourage it, she said quietly. I know, Julian said, and his voice softened. You haven't done anything wrong, Claire. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you have feelings for Evan? Claire thought about it, really thought about it. Evan was charming and funny and vulnerable in a way that made you want to protect him. She cared about him. But was it the same as what she felt when Julian looked at her? When Julian's hand brushed hers by accident? When Julian smiled at her like she'd just solved an impossible problem? No, she said. Not the way you mean. Julian exhaled, relief visible in the line of his shoulders. Then I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound selfish, but I can't keep it to myself anymore. I don't just have feelings for you. I'm in love with you. Completely. The kind of love where I wake up thinking about you and go to sleep hoping I'll dream about you. The kind where every success feels empty if I can't share it with you. And I know it's complicated. I know there's a power imbalance because you work for me. I know my brother has feelings too. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just professional respect. It's so much more than that. Claire's eyes were wet. Julian, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. And I need you to know that whatever you feel or don't feel, your job is secure. You're family to us now, both of us. That doesn't change. Julian, stop talking, Claire said, and before he could respond, she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was a kiss that said everything words couldn't. All the fear of the past months, all the hope for the future, all the connection they'd been dancing around since that first day. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the night you stepped between me and Evan in the garden, he admitted. I've wanted you to, Claire whispered back. They stood there, wrapped in each other, until reality began to creep back in. We need to talk to Evan, Claire said. This is going to hurt him. I know, Julian said, and the guilt was clear in his voice. But I'm not giving you up. I can't. Does that make me a terrible brother? It makes you human, Claire said. We'll figure it out. Together. They found Evan in the library, head in his hands, looking miserable. He looked up when they entered, and his expression cycled through confusion, realization, and pain in rapid succession. Oh, he said quietly. I see. Julian sat down across from him. Evan, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But you're choosing her, Evan said, and it wasn't accusatory. Just sad. You both are. And I get it, I do. You're perfect for each other. I'm just the screw-up who says the wrong thing at the wrong time. That's not true, Claire said, sitting beside him. Evan, you're brilliant and kind, and you've changed so much in these months. Some woman is going to be incredibly lucky to have you. But that woman isn't me. I care about you so much, like a brother, like a friend. But my heart, it belongs to Julian. And I think if you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that what you feel for me is gratitude and affection, not romantic love. You were looking for someone to believe in you, and you found that. But that's not the same as being in love. Evan was quiet for a long time, turning her words over. Finally, he said, You think you know me so well. I do, Claire said gently. Because we're alike, you and me. We've both spent our lives looking for someone to see us as worthy, and we both found that in this family. But you don't need to be in love with me to be worthy, Evan. You're already enough. Evan's eyes were wet. I wanted it to be you. I wanted to be the one who got the girl for once instead of always being second to Julian. This isn't about winning or losing, Julian said. This isn't a competition. It's just 3 people trying to be honest about their feelings. And honestly, I'm terrified that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm not good enough for Claire, that she's going to wake up one day and realize she could do so much better than the workaholic control freak with family baggage. Evan laughed through his tears. You're an idiot. She's crazy about you. Anyone can see it. But are we okay? Julian asked. You and me? Because I can't lose you again. I just got you back. Evan looked at his brother, really looked at him, and something shifted. We're okay. It's going to suck for a while, watching you two together. But we're okay. You're my brother. That matters more than anything else. The brothers hugged, and Claire had to wipe her own eyes. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Evan's hurt was real, and it would take time to heal. But it was honest. And sometimes, honesty is the best gift you can give someone. Over the next 6 months, life settled into a new rhythm at the Archer estate. Claire officially became Julian's girlfriend, though she insisted on finding a new role at Archer Biomedical that wasn't directly under his management to avoid any appearance of impropriety. She became the director of hospital relations, using her nursing background to bridge the gap between the company and the medical community they served. Evan threw himself into therapy and into learning the business properly. He started dating a financial analyst from their accounting department, a no-nonsense woman named Priya, who didn't take any of his nonsense and called him out when he slipped into old patterns. She was exactly what he needed. The antibiotic project succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Archer Biomedical secured FDA approval and began manufacturing a drug that would save thousands of lives annually. The company's value tripled. The board that had once voted to sell was now fielding acquisition offers they happily rejected. Everything seemed perfect. Claire had gone from homeless to successful in less than a year. She'd found love, found family, found purpose. She'd helped save a company and reconcile 2 brothers. It was the kind of ending that made you believe in second chances and happy outcomes. But life, as Claire had learned the hard way, is rarely that simple. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in June. Claire was at the office when her phone rang with an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Claire Matthews? A woman's voice, professional but cautious. Yes, who is this? My name is Detective Angela Rivera with the Chicago Police Department, Fraud Division. I'm calling about a case involving a woman named Jessica Holbrook. I believe you filed a report about being defrauded by her approximately 8 months ago. Claire's blood went cold. Yes, I did. Did you find her? We found her, Detective Rivera said. She's been arrested. She's conned over 40 people in the last 3 years, accumulated nearly $500,000. But that's not why I'm calling. During questioning, she mentioned your name specifically. She said she needed to warn you about something. Would you be willing to come to the station? Claire agreed, her mind racing. What could Jessica possibly need to warn her about? She told Julian she had an emergency and drove to the police station, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. Detective Rivera met her in an interview room, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes that had seen too much human ugliness. Miss Matthews, thank you for coming. I want to be clear that Jessica Holbrook is a career criminal and a pathological liar. Everything she says should be taken with extreme skepticism. That said, she was very insistent that I contact you. What did she say? Claire asked. The detective slid a folder across the table. She claims that she didn't target you randomly. She says someone hired her to befriend you, gain your trust, and engineer your eviction. Someone who wanted you desperate and vulnerable. Claire's heart was pounding now. That's insane. Who would do that? I was nobody. I'm still nobody. According to her, you were targeted because of your connection to a patient at your hospital, a man named Thomas Archer. The room spun. What? She claims that someone from the Archer family paid her $50,000 to destroy your stability and make you desperate enough to accept any help offered. That your encounter with Julian Archer wasn't an accident. It was engineered from the start. Claire couldn't breathe. No, that's not possible. Hector, the security guard, he's the one who connected me with Julian. It was random. Was it? Detective Rivera opened the folder. We've been investigating Miss Holbrook's financial records. She received a wire transfer of $50,000 from a shell corporation 3 weeks before she met you. That corporation's sole signatory is registered to an LLC that has business ties to Archer Biomedical. And Miss Holbrook's phone records show multiple calls to and from a number registered to the Archer estate. Claire's entire world was crumbling. You're saying Julian set this up? That he hired someone to ruin my life, so he could swoop in and save me? I'm not saying anything, Detective Rivera said carefully. I'm telling you what we found. Miss Holbrook could be lying to cut a deal. The evidence is circumstantial, but she was very specific about details. She knew things about your background, your family, your financial situation before she ever met you. Someone gave her that information. Claire stood up, the chair scraping loudly. I need to go. Miss Matthews, I understand this is a shock. I need to go, Claire repeated, and she fled the police station before the detective could say another word. She drove aimlessly for an hour, her mind a cyclone of thoughts. It couldn't be true. Julian had been nothing but kind to her. He'd helped her, loved her, never asked for anything in return. But the more she thought about it, the more questions arose. How had Hector known about Julian's need for an assistant at 3 in the morning? Why had Julian offered her such a generous position based on a single phone call? Why had everything fallen into place so perfectly? And then there was the other question, the one that made her stomach turn. If Julian had orchestrated her desperation to make himself her savior, what did that say about everything that had happened since? The brothers' reconciliation, Evan's transformation, her own success at the company. Had any of it been real? Or was she just a pawn in some twisted game? She found herself at the hospital where she used to work, sitting in the parking garage on the 4th level where Hector had found her that night. She called him. Claire, it's good to hear from you. How are things at the estate? Hector, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. When you found me in the parking garage, when you called Julian, was that really spontaneous? Or did someone ask you to look out for me? The silence on the other end of the line told her everything she needed to know. Hector, Claire, I don't know what you've heard, but just tell me the truth. Please. More silence. Then heavily. Mr. Julian called me 3 weeks before that night. He said he was looking for someone, a nurse, someone who'd known his father. He said if I heard about anyone having hard times, someone trustworthy, to let him know. He said he wanted to help someone his father had appreciated. When I found you that night, yes, I called him. But I didn't know about anything else, I swear. I thought he was just trying to do a good deed. Claire hung up without saying goodbye. She sat in her car, in the same spot where her life had changed, and felt everything she'd built crumbling around her. Someone who'd known Thomas Archer. She'd been a nurse at the hospital where Thomas had died. She'd been part of his care team during his final days. She remembered him, a kind man who'd talked about his sons, who'd worried about their future. She'd held his hand when the pain was bad. She'd been there when he died. Had Thomas said something about her? Had Julian tracked her down after his father's death? Had everything, every single thing, been a manipulation from the very beginning? She drove back to the estate, her jaw set. She needed answers, and she needed them now. She found Julian in his study, exactly where she knew he'd be. He looked up when she entered, smiling, but the smile faded when he saw her expression. Claire, what's wrong? Did you hire Jessica Holbrook to destroy my life? The color drained from Julian's face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, where did you hear that? From the police. From Jessica herself. From the evidence. So I'm asking you directly. Did you engineer my eviction, my desperation, my rescue? Was everything a setup from the very beginning? Julian closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were filled with anguish. Yes. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Claire felt something inside her shatter. Why? She whispered. Julian stood, moving toward her, but she stepped back. He stopped, pain flashing across his face. Because my father asked me to. What? Before Dad died, he talked about a lot of things. Regrets, mostly. Things he wished he'd done differently. People he wished he'd helped. And he talked about a nurse who'd shown him such kindness in his final days. A young woman who'd told him about her own father's death, who'd sat with him when no one else could. You probably don't even remember the conversation. It was late at night. He was in pain. You were checking his vitals. But he remembered. He told me your name. He said, "Julian, I've spent my whole life building a company, making money, creating a legacy. But that girl, she showed me what really matters. Compassion. Real human connection. If you ever get the chance, do something for her. Not because she'll pay you back, but because kindness should be rewarded." Claire's legs felt weak. She did remember that conversation vaguely. Thomas Archer had been having a bad night, struggling with his mortality. She'd stayed late, held his hand, told him about her own father to let him know he wasn't alone in his fear. "So you tracked me down," she said, her voice hollow. "I looked into your situation," Julian admitted. "I learned about your struggles, your financial problems, the roommate scam you'd fallen victim to. And I saw an opportunity to fulfill my father's last wish and maybe, selfishly, find someone who'd known him at the end. Someone who could tell me what he was really like when he wasn't being Thomas Archer, the pharmaceutical magnate. So you hired Jessica to make it worse. You made me homeless." "No," Julian said firmly. "Jessica had already scammed you. That was real. But yes, I knew about it before Hector called me. I asked him to keep an eye out for you, to let me know if you needed help. I wanted to offer you a job, a place to stay, a chance to rebuild. I wanted to honor my father's request." "By manipulating me?" Claire's voice was rising now, anger breaking through the shock. "By setting up this elaborate rescue scenario so I'd be grateful and dependent?" "It wasn't like that," Julian said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I just wanted to help you. Everything after that, everything between us, that was real." "How can I know that?" Claire shouted. "How can I know any of it was real when the foundation of everything was a lie? Did you manipulate Evan too? Did you orchestrate the entire fight between you two, so I'd play therapist and bond with your family?" "No. God, no. The issues with Evan were real. Our relationship problems were real. The company crisis was real. You helped us with all of that genuinely. I never manipulated you emotionally, Claire. I just gave you an opportunity. An opportunity you engineered by making me desperate." Claire was crying now, angry tears streaming down her face. "You took away my agency, Julian. You made choices for me without my knowledge or consent. You played God with my life because you felt guilty about your father or nostalgic or whatever. And you never thought to just, I don't know, find me and offer me a job honestly. You had to make it this grand rescue." Julian reached for her again, and again she stepped back. "Claire, please. I'm sorry. I know I handled it wrong, but I never meant to hurt you. I fell in love with you because of who you are, not because of some plan. That was never part of it." "How convenient," Claire said bitterly. "The damsel you orchestrated falls in love with her rescuer. Did you plan that too? Did you count on the power imbalance and the gratitude and the emotional vulnerability to make me dependent on you?" "No," Julian said, and now he was crying too. "I fell in love with you the night you stepped between me and Evan without knowing anything about us or our history. I fell in love with your courage and your compassion and your wisdom. Everything I feel for you is real, Claire. Everything. But I'll never know that for sure, will I?" Claire said, and her voice broke. "I'll always wonder what was genuine and what was manipulation. I'll always question whether I chose you or whether you engineered me to choose you. You've poisoned everything, Julian. Everything." She turned to leave, but Julian's voice stopped her. "My father didn't ask me to make you fall in love with me. He asked me to give you a chance, to help you rebuild. Everything beyond that was my choice. And yes, I started it with deception, and that was wrong. But what we built together was real. The company we saved, the family we healed, the love we found. That was us, Claire. That was real." Claire looked back at him. This man she'd loved. This man she'd thought she knew. "I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I ever did." She walked out of the study, out of the mansion, back to the cottage that had been her sanctuary. She packed her bags, the same duffel bag and backpack she'd arrived with 8 months ago. Only now they were supplemented with clothes and belongings she'd accumulated. Margaret found her halfway through packing, her face stricken. Miss Claire, please, don't go. Whatever's happened, it can be fixed. Can it? Claire asked. Can you fix a foundation built on lies? Mr. Julian loves you, Margaret said. I've worked for this family for 20 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Whatever mistakes he made, his feelings are genuine. Maybe, Claire said, but my feelings were based on a false premise. I thought I was helping a family in crisis. I thought I was building something real with someone who saw me as an equal. Instead, I was a project, a debt to be paid to a dead man. How do I come back from that? She finished packing and walked out of the cottage for what she was certain would be the last time. Evan was waiting by her car, his face anguished. Claire, please. I know what Julian did was wrong, but don't leave. We need you. I need you. Evan, did you know? Claire asked. About any of it? No, he said immediately. I swear on everything, I had no idea. Julian never told me. I thought your meeting was pure chance like everyone else. Claire believed him. Evan had never been good at hiding his feelings. If he'd known, she would have seen it. I'm sorry, she said. I care about you, Evan. You've come so far, and I'm proud of you. But I can't stay here. Not now. Where will you go? I don't know, Claire admitted. But I'll figure it out. I always do. She drove away from the Archer estate, with tears blurring her vision, not knowing where she was going, only knowing she couldn't stay. She'd survived being homeless once. She'd survived this too. She checked into a cheap motel, the kind where you pay by the week and don't ask questions about the stains on the carpet. It was a far cry from the cottage, but it was hers. Nobody's charity. Nobody's project. She called the hospital and asked about returning to her nursing position. They were happy to have her back. She'd been good at her job, and good nurses were always in demand. Within a week, she was back in scrubs, back to 12-hour shifts, back to saving lives in a way that was tangible and real. But at night, alone in her motel room, she couldn't stop thinking about Julian, about the look on his face when she'd confronted him, about the way he'd said everything they'd built was real, about whether she'd overreacted, whether she'd thrown away something genuine because of how it started. Her younger brother, Tyler, called her from college. She told him she'd left the Archer estate, but not why. Claire, are you okay? You sound different. I'm fine, she lied. Just dealing with some stuff. Is it about that billionaire guy you were working for? Mom said you were dating him. Claire's throat tightened. It didn't work out. Did he hurt you? Because I'll drive up there and kick his ass. I don't care how rich he is. Despite everything, Claire smiled. No, Tyler. He didn't hurt me. It's complicated. You always say that. Just once, I wish you'd let people help you instead of trying to handle everything alone. After they hung up, Claire sat on the motel bed and thought about her brother's words. Was that what she was doing? Handling everything alone out of pride or fear? Or was she genuinely protecting herself from further manipulation? 3 weeks after she left, a package arrived at the hospital with her name on it. Inside was a letter and a check. The check was for $9,000, the exact amount Jessica had stolen from her. The letter was from Julian. Claire, I know money can't fix what I did, but Jessica Holbrook was convicted and ordered to pay restitution to her victims. This is your portion. You earned it through your own actions in reporting her. It has nothing to do with me. I want you to know that I've spent the last 3 weeks in therapy, trying to understand why I handled things the way I did. My therapist says I have a savior complex, that I've spent my whole life trying to rescue people as a way to control my environment and avoid dealing with my own vulnerabilities. She says I turned you into a project because I was too afraid to just be honest and ask if you wanted to know me. She's probably right. I am a control freak who thought he knew what was best for everyone. But here's what I learned that wasn't manipulation. You are the strongest, wisest, most compassionate person I've ever met. You didn't need me to save you. You would have survived and thrived without my interference. I robbed you of that journey, and I'm sorry. If you never want to see me again, I understand. But if there's any part of you that thinks what we had was worth fighting for, I'll be at the bench in Millennium Park, where we had our first real date every Saturday at noon. I'll wait there every Saturday, for as long as it takes. Not because I think I deserve another chance, but because I love you enough to try. Julian. Claire read the letter 3 times, then put it in her drawer and tried to forget about it. She cashed the check and put the money toward a security deposit on a small apartment. She returned to her life, her routine, her independence. But Saturday came, and she found herself thinking about that bench in Millennium Park, about the afternoon they'd spent there, eating overpriced ice cream and watching children play in the fountain, about the way Julian had told her about his childhood, about losing his mother young, about the pressure of being the responsible one, about how vulnerable he'd been, how human. She didn't go that first Saturday, or the second, but on the third Saturday, she found herself walking through Millennium Park, telling herself she was just there for the fresh air, that she happened to be in the area. Julian was there, sitting on their bench, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit. He looked thinner, tired, like he hadn't been sleeping. When he saw her approaching, hope flashed across his face so bright it hurt to see. "Hi," she said, stopping a few feet away. "Hi," he said back. "You came." "I'm not promising anything," Claire said quickly. "I just wanted to talk." "That's more than I deserve," Julian said. "Thank you." She sat down on the far end of the bench, maintaining distance. For a while, they sat in silence, watching people walk by, listening to the city sounds. Finally, Julian spoke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about control and fear and why I couldn't just be honest with you from the start. My therapist thinks it goes back to losing my mom. She died suddenly, a car accident, when I was 12. One day she was there, the next she was gone, and I had no control over it. Dad fell apart. Evan was too young to understand, and I became the one holding everything together. I learned that if I controlled enough variables, if I planned enough steps ahead, I could prevent disaster. But life doesn't work that way, and people definitely don't work that way." Claire listened, her heart aching despite her anger. "When Dad asked me to help you, I saw it as another problem to solve," Julian continued. "I didn't think about your agency or your feelings. I just thought, I can fix this. And in fixing it, I broke the most important thing, your trust in me. I can't take that back, but I can promise that if you give me another chance, I'll spend every day proving that I see you as a partner, not a project, that I love you for who you are, not for who I think I can help you become." "How do I know you won't try to control things again?" Claire asked. "That's who you are, Julian. You said it yourself. It's how you're wired." "I'm in therapy 3 times a week," Julian said. "I'm learning to recognize when I'm trying to control situations instead of collaborate. I'm learning to ask instead of assume. And I've made changes at the company too. Evan is now co-CEO with me. Equal partners, equal decision-making. I'm learning to let go." Claire absorbed this. "How is Evan?" "He's good. He and Priya got engaged. He asks about you constantly. The whole household does. Margaret threatens to quit if I don't fix things with you." Despite herself, Claire smiled. "Margaret's loyalty is to the family, not to me." "You are family," Julian said quietly. "That was never a lie. From the moment you stepped between me and Evan that first night, you became part of us. That didn't change when you left." Claire felt tears pricking her eyes. "I want to believe you, Julian. I want to believe everything we built was real. But every time I try, I remember that it started with deception, and I wonder what else might not be true." "Then let me prove it," Julian said. "Not with grand gestures or money or trying to solve your problems. Just with time and honesty and showing up. I'll be here every Saturday. I'll answer any question you have, no matter how uncomfortable. I'll give you as much space as you need and as much presence as you want. Because you're worth it, Claire. You're worth the work." Claire looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the sincerity in his eyes. She saw a man who'd made terrible choices, but was genuinely trying to change. She thought about her own father, about how pride and stubbornness had destroyed him. She thought about the brothers she'd helped reconcile, about the lesson she tried to teach them that forgiveness and moving forward mattered more than being right. Could she take her own advice? "I need time," she said finally. "I need to rebuild my sense of self outside of your world. I need to know who I am when I'm not Claire who works for the Archers, or Claire who saved the family. Just Claire. I understand, Julian said. But, Claire continued, and his eyes snapped to hers with desperate hope. I'm willing to try. Slowly. On my terms. No pressure, no expectations, no trying to fix me or my life. Just two people getting to know each other honestly for the first time. Yes, Julian said immediately. Anything you want. However you want it. Then maybe we can meet here again next Saturday, Claire said. Just talk. No grand gestures. Just conversation. I'd like that, Julian said, and his smile was tentative but genuine. Over the following months, they did exactly that. Every Saturday at noon, they met on their bench. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their fears, their dreams, their mistakes. Julian told her about the pressure of inheriting his father's expectations, about feeling like he had to be perfect to make up for Evan's chaos. Claire told him about growing up with an alcoholic father, about feeling responsible for holding her family together, about the guilt of leaving her brother and mother to pursue her own dreams. They discovered they were both people who'd learned to be strong because they'd had no choice. Both people who'd turned their pain into purpose. Both people who were terrified of vulnerability because it felt like weakness. Slowly, carefully, trust began to rebuild. Not the naive trust Claire had before, but something deeper. Trust earned through consistency, through honesty, through showing up even when it was uncomfortable. Claire kept her nursing job, insisting on maintaining her independence. But she started taking on consulting work for Archer Biomedical again, projects where she worked with Evan and the hospital relations team. She saw Julian outside of their Saturday meetings, casual dinners and walks, rebuilding their relationship from friendship up. 6 months after she'd left, she accepted Julian's invitation to visit the estate again. It felt strange walking through those gates, seeing the cottage that had been her home. Margaret greeted her with tears and a crushing hug. Evan introduced her to Priya, who shook Claire's hand and said, I've heard so much about you. Thank you for fixing these Archer boys. They were a mess before you came along. They had dinner together, all of them, like a real family. And Claire realized that despite the painful beginning, despite the manipulation and the betrayal, something genuine had grown from it. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. After dinner, Julian walked her to her car. I know you need more time, he said. I know we're not back to where we were, and maybe we never will be. But I want you to know that these last 6 months, rebuilding this with you, earning your trust again, it's been the most meaningful thing I've ever done. Claire looked up at him. This man who'd saved her in the worst possible way, and then had to learn to let her save herself. I'm not the same person I was when I first came here, she said. I'm stronger now, more sure of myself. I don't need you to rescue me anymore. I know, Julian said. That's why I love you even more now than I did then. Good, Claire said, because I don't want to be loved for my vulnerability. I want to be loved for my strength. You always have been, Julian said. I was just too stupid and controlling to see it at first. Claire smiled, then made a decision. She'd been thinking about it for weeks, weighing the risks against the possibilities. I'm ready to try again, she said. Really try. Not just Saturday meetings and casual dinners. I want to see if we can build something real, starting from honesty this time. Julian's eyes widened. Are you sure? No, Claire admitted. But I've learned that nothing worth having comes with guarantees. We might fail. You might slip into old patterns. I might be too afraid to trust completely. But we might also build something extraordinary. And I think you're worth the risk. Julian pulled her into his arms, and she let him, feeling the rightness of it despite all the complications. I promise I'll spend every day proving I'm worth that risk, he whispered into her hair. Don't promise, Claire said. Just do it. And he did. They both did. It wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was better. It was two imperfect people choosing to be honest with each other, to call each other out when they slipped into old patterns, to build something based not on rescue, but on mutual respect. Claire moved back to the estate, but this time into her own apartment that she paid rent for from her salary at the hospital and her consulting fees. Equal partnership, No debt, no obligation. She and Julian dated properly, without the weight of her gratitude or his guilt hanging over them. Evan and Priya got married in the garden where Claire had first intervened in the brothers' fight. During his toast, Evan said, "My brother and I spent years trying to destroy each other over money and pride and Dad's legacy. It took a woman with nothing to show us that the only legacy worth fighting for is love. Claire, you saved us. And now you're family forever, whether you like it or not." Claire cried, and Julian held her hand, and she thought about how strange life was, how the worst things could lead to the best things, how being broken open could let the light in. 2 years after that first Saturday in Millennium Park, Julian proposed. Not with a grand gesture or a public display. Just the two of them, on their bench, watching the sunset. "I'm not trying to save you," he said as he knelt. "I'm asking if you'll build a life with me as equals. Partners in everything. Will you marry me?" Claire said yes. Not because she needed him, but because she wanted him. There's a difference, and it made all the difference. On their wedding day, her brother Tyler walked her down the aisle, proud and emotional. Margaret cried through the entire ceremony. Hector was there in the front row, the man whose phone call had started everything. And as Claire said her vows to Julian, she meant every word, because they were based on truth, not gratitude.